mother is a very special thing. Other than the Lord Jesus Christ, I think that a mother is one of the most precious gifts that God gives in this world. Because a mother is one who loves and has the one who is always seems to be there when we need it. Mother is a very special thing. Mother is a very special thing.
Imagine an all-American girl, with a white dress, sprinting through a field at sunset, the wind in her light brown hair. She's barefoot, her feet tough and dirty from the wear and tear of deep south terrain. It's a small town, in the late 20th century, lined with trailer parks, muddy swamps, sports fields, diners, and churches. Everyone gathers in worship on Sunday and watches race cars and football in the evenings. Brown wood walls, lead paint, dingy carpet, worn furniture, American flags and crosses. This is the world of Ethel Cain, the preacher's daughter. Born in Shady Grove, Alabama, sometime around spring or summer of 1970, to Joseph and Vera Cain. A good Christian girl, Southern Baptist to be specific. She's plain, conservative, beautiful, yet low-slung, unafraid of the muck. And, most of all, she's pure. Right? It's 1980. She's 10 years old, and her home is on fire. Her and her mother Vera make it out. Joseph doesn't. It's a town tragedy, the death of the preacher, but the circumstances are suspicious. More on that later. She continues life with her mother, and as she enters adolescence, she carries the baggage of her trauma with it. She becomes jaded, bitter. In Hayden's own words, she's very angry, and she feels trapped. She feels scared. She's a loose cannon wrapped in a bow. She's very much someone who is hanging on by a thread, who has no other option than to be perfect. She has an image to uphold. She's a raging fire that's burning behind a closed door. She's an American teenager. Ethel has so much internalized conflict and chaos within her, brought about by her troubled upbringing, and it only compounds as she grows into herself. As a teen, she uses alcohol to cope, and develops a resentment towards her town and the box she's been forcibly squeezed into by factors beyond her control. She craves validation. She wants to be loved, and she wants to love. She needs to be perfect. She needs to be good. She needs to be the portrait of the all-American girl. But deep down, she senses that she isn't. But rather that she is simply, as Hayden puts it, the casualty of the all-American girl. It eats her from the inside. Her self-worth, her image, her identity. But she chases it anyway. Fleeting and imaginary, like a mirage on a hot southern day. She gets lost without that chase. At her school, she meets a boy named Willoughby Tucker and falls in love with him. They disappear together in an abandoned house on the edge of town, where they lay on dirty mattresses and talk for hours and sing and dance by open windows, all while pretending they're in Nebraska, somewhere far, far away from Shady Grove. It's a pure and saccharine love between two young spirits. What could go wrong? They grow up. And as that happens, Willoughby leaves town, and Ethel with it. The ensuing heartbreak is palpable, as she longs for him achingly, and for their house in Nebraska. She tries to drink the pain away, but it only drowns her in her sorrow and loneliness, as it reverberates against ambient guitar and piano. Ethel needs him. Without him, she feels that she is nothing. She is left to wallow in her isolation, and the self-hate grows. She blames herself, and laments that she would kill herself if it meant being with him once more. Sometime later, she meets another man, named Logan Phelps, a rugged motorcyclist and a criminal. She falls in love with him, and they go on the run together, crossing over state lines, and becoming a sort of Bonnie and Clyde couple, committing robbery and theft. Logan was a wild man, and violent, as he would often get into fights, or possibly even strike Ethel, showing his love through shades of black and blue. Yet she follows him anyway, and she loves him with everything in her. She vows to never leave him, no matter how violent or unhinged he becomes. Her loyalty is unwavering, giving herself over to him completely, mind and body. Her sexuality is a focal point for relationships. She often defines herself through it, and to give up her body to her partner's pleasure is her expression of love and subservience as the perfect woman. Her worth is defined by the pleasure and service she provides, specifically to the men in her life, much like many women, unfortunately, especially women who were brought up like Ethel. But more on that in just a bit. Back to Logan. Eventually, her love would come to an end in a fatal police altercation, as Logan is shot and killed, and Ethel manages to flee the scene. Now on the run from police, she takes this time on her own to reflect on her upbringing, and all the chaos and all the trauma. She grapples with feelings of pain, loss, bitterness, anger, and power. She wants to be washed clean of her past and the sins it holds, as though baptized in a chapel or a river. She refers to a noose around her neck that she removes and wraps around her hand, a callback to the beginning of the album, where she swings by her neck from the family tree. It's a reclamation of her power, and it conveys a desire for control, something she's never had. She wants to break free from her lineage, and, more importantly, the dark secrets within it. Remember when I mentioned the circumstances of Joseph's death? Well, it hasn't been confirmed, but it is heavily implied and theorized that her mother, Vera, and herself are responsible for his death. And by responsible, I mean responsible, as in they intentionally killed him in the house fire. Now again, this isn't confirmed, but it is heavily implied that Ethel was involved in some foul play, with lines such as, "I've killed before, and I'll kill again," and "I'm just a child, but I'm not above violence. My mama raised me better than that." I mean, come on. It's as clear as day. That man was murdered. Now, if this is true, which I firmly believe it is, you may wonder, why would they murder Joseph, Vera's husband, Ethel's father, the town's preacher, probably the most respected and revered man in the entire town of Shady Grove? Well, he was not the man he presented himself as. The good Christian family man, it was only a facade. We learned that in secret he was a predator, as Ethel reflects on the disturbing relationship with him and how he sexually abused her as a child. This explains many of her struggles with her womanhood, sexuality, and with men. Her sexuality was defined for her before she even knew what it was. Since a child, she was trained to view herself as an object to men. She is nothing if not a vessel for their pleasure and gratification, and she was desensitized to their violence through the man she was meant to trust the most. And still, she battles with her feelings towards her father. She idolized him as a child, wanting to be like him, perfect, respected, loved, and in a way she still does as a young adult. But his abuse drove her into so much inner turmoil and pure chaos, and she wants to escape it. She wants to escape him. It's hard, and as she comes to realize, nearly impossible. As stated before, she has repeatedly expressed a desire to break free from the constraints of her upbringing. She wants a new life away from it, away from the family tree. But that bears the question, can she? Is that possible for her? Well, according to Hayden, family is the closest thing to her, but she wants it to be the farthest thing from her. But you know you can never really escape that. Ethel, despite her desperation, despite her longing, chasing, no matter how many times she tries to wash herself clean, it will always be with her. The trauma, the chaos, the horror and sin, it runs through her blood. Even when she screams, scrubbing her fingers raw in the river water, she'll never escape what she's made up of. And that scares her more than anything else. Eventually, she arrives in Texas in tattered clothes and armed with a revolver. It's here that she meets another charming man on the side of the road. His name? Isaiah Abrams. It's January 13th of 1991, at 3:15 a.m., when Ethel goes missing. She was last seen being forced into a black short-bed pickup truck in the old Winn-Dixie parking lot on Abrams Street in Arlington, Texas. A witness stated that a white man had kidnapped her, that man being Isaiah. He drives her out west, and over time, she develops Stockholm Syndrome to compartmentalize and cope with having been abducted, even convincing herself that she took off with Isaiah willingly. They develop an intimate relationship, and she gives herself up to him, as she has done with men her whole life. However, through her altered perception, she doesn't see the glaring red flags, and for once is actually hopeful. She believes she is on her way to a new life with her new love. It seems to her that she has finally acquired what she's been chasing since she was a teenager, the American dream. And maybe, in a fucked up, twisted way, she was correct, but it's not the American dream she pictured exactly. They arrive in California, and Isaiah wastes no time turning her body into a commodity. A vice for pleasure and personal gain, the very thing her father made of her years ago. He pimps her out in the backs of strip clubs, and feeds her drugs on the regular to keep her in line. With nothing else left of herself, she leans into the abuse, justifying it and reveling in the novelty and the daring opposite to her Christian conservative hometown. If it feels good, then it can't be bad, where I can be immoral in a stranger's lap, she says, in a druggy haze, living in blissful denial, as though she's simply exploring the darker parts of her femininity. And in a way she is, but the reality is that it's none of her own choice. She has entered a free-fall of exploitation and coercion, where the only thing she is an object of men's desire. At this point, her sexuality is not just a focal point of the relationship, but rather it is the relationship, and it is her. Her womanhood has been reduced to something degrading and dark, and even if she may not see it yet, it's about to become much, much darker. The drugs tighten their grip around her mind, and she becomes erratic, delirious, scared. The illusion of control is fading rapidly as Isaiah is becoming increasingly abusive. It's here, the climax of the album and story, that she realizes the gravity of her situation and confronts the darkness. The song Ptolemaea is a reference to the ninth circle of hell, specifically the third zone. Named after Ptolemy, captain of Jericho, who murdered his father-in-law, Simon Maccabee, and his two brother-in-laws after treating them to a feast, in a vicious act of betrayal. Hence this circle of hell belongs to the traitoress. This theme is important to this part of Ethel's story, as she realizes she's about to die at the hands of Isaiah, the man she believed she could trust, the man who invited her into his life only to betray her. She's angry, more angry than she has ever been, and she's also more terrified than she has ever been. Not just terrified of her imminent doom, but of her condemnation, as she not only sees Isaiah as a traitor, but herself too. She believes she will be condemned to the pits of hell for abandoning her family and faith, and for possibly murdering her father, a preacher, the ultimate betrayal. It's at this point that she's realized that everything she has been running from has returned to her tenfold. As Hayden puts it, she has so much to prove and so many things she wants to get away from, but ultimately she just winds up running a full circle right back into them. In her attempt to run away from everything holding her back, she has only met a wrath far, far worse. Isaiah attacks her, and as he does, she screams out. In a last climatic effort to regain control. But there's nothing she can do. It's already been done. It's chilling, brutal, violent, and visceral. Her scream reverberates over an explosion of heavy instrumentals as she brands herself the face of love's rage. For every time she has been hurt and abandoned, when all she ever wanted was love. Over distorted guitars, the song goes out with a bang as intense as Ethel's, as she confronts death himself, and he prays for her. And I believe that speaks for itself. While it's unclear how exactly Ethel dies, it is clear to me that it was not quick nor painless. Her last moments were of terror and agony, as can be conveyed by the tone of both Ptolemea and the following track, August Underground, wherein Isaiah brings her into the attic of an abandoned house where they were staying at the time and leaves her there to waste and ultimately pass away. Then, probably to her surprise, she ascends to heaven over ambient piano. It's somber and beautiful as she's welcomed into the arms of God, finally free from the turmoil and chaos of her short life. But it's apparent that her soul is damaged from the never-ending trauma, as the melodic piano distorts towards the end into something dissonant, the musical representation of Ethel's life and death, both equally tragic. Now in heaven, she reflects on her life, the people in her town, the sun-bleached flies, talking and living and dying, at church singing the gospel, and she longs to be with them, joining the choir in their heartfelt singing.
God loves you, but not enough to save you.
A message Ethel has become all too familiar with. She reflects on the unorthodox teachings of her parents, and her regrets for the way she has led her life. But in the end, there's nothing she can change, so she just prays and prays and prays, awashed in the love of God and letting it all be in forgiveness and love and the holiest gospel choir. But there's something lingering, a longing for her house in Nebraska, with her first love, Willoughby Tucker. Even though she tries, she can't let go of her life. Her family, her town, her lovers. It's all still there, and it's all she knows, and it's all she wants now. But then there's Isaiah. Still with her lifeless body as it grows cold in his basement, she laments her traitorous lover and watches his final act of violation towards her body as he cannibalizes her. But her body bites back and makes him sick. Ethel seems to feel many emotions witnessing this from above. Concern, longing, anger, and possibly even amusement? At least, that's my interpretation. The sad truth of it is, she still cares for him, asking him if she's making him feel sick. She wants to be good for him, wants to please him, even after everything he put her through. She calls him handsome as he prepares and consumes her body, indicating that her attraction to him is still very much alive, even if her body is dead and cold. But there does seem to be a hint of anger towards him, especially towards the end of the song, as she belts out, "Am I making you feel sick?" over and over again. It's almost as though a part of her is reveling in the sense of justice, or even intentionally rolling in the grave of his stomach as revenge for what he did. Whatever the case for Isaiah, she leaves him be, and her final words are to her mother, bidding her farewell in what is probably the most heart-wrenching part of the entire album. And like the prayer in Ptolemea, I believe it speaks for itself.
Want you just to tell you that I made it real far, and that I never blamed you for loving me the way you did while you were torn apart. I would still eat with you there. Don't think about it too hard, you'll never sleep a wink at night again. Don't worry about me and these green eyes, mama, just know that I love